Texas has departed, but in reference, she referenced 9/11, and yes, we unfortunately, were attacked on 9/11. It was a horrific attack, but we also started a war in Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11, which has cost us over 4,000 lives and billions of dollars. So I just wanted to clarify that. Good to see you, Dr. Romer, and all of you. Let me just I have one question for each of you. The Congressional Black Caucus continues to sound the alarm regarding the glaring unemployment rate among the chronically unemployed. The unemployment rate is over 15% for African Americans, over 12% Latinos, compared to a national average of about 8.8%. The Congressional Black Caucus has specific proposals to address these huge disparities, which really are moral gaps. We've presented them to our leadership and to President Obama as recently as last week. I'll give you a copy of these proposals, but there's been much debate on the notion that broad economic policies without adding targeted policies and strategies to areas of highest unemployment will trickle down to these populations. It hasn't worked really in the past, and I want to know, Dr. Romer, if you think trickle-down economic policies will work now. Second, to Secretary Geithner, we also discussed with the President a report indicating that only 1.1% of African-American businesses and 1.6% of Latino businesses have received contracts under the Recovery Act, although we have from the Stakeholders Outreach Initiative that 16.0% of our contracting dollars have gone to minority firms. There's a big discrepancy there because the Kirin Institute has done a study. They used government data. So did a reference in the Bloomberg Business Report by Jesse Washington in February. He also said 1.7% of Latino businesses and 1.1% of African American businesses. So I'd like to get that clarified, and I'd like these numbers broken down. And finally, to Director Orszag, good to see you. Let me just ask you about this partial freeze in spending as it relates to military spending, because we can't seem to turn off the spigot that rains down on these defense contractors. What action does the administration plan to do to reverse this trend and finally rein in military expenditures, which now account for 58% of the federal discretionary spending, when we know there are billions and billions and billions of dollars in Cold War-era weapon systems that really need to be taken off at the table? How do you all intend to address this within the context of the freezing spend?
All right, well, why don't I start off? I think the point that you raised, that as horrible as this recession is on average, it is particularly hard on certain demographic groups. We know on certain parts of the country. We know on certain, different types of people, just in terms of how much education you have. It's been much more, the unemployment rate has been much higher for less educated workers. All of that is absolutely terrible and something that we need to deal with. I do want to say that one of the things we know is things like the unemployment rate for African Americans is particularly, it moves with the business cycle just more extremely. And so just as the unemployment rate tends to go up more when the unemployment rate rises nationally, it comes down more when the overall unemployment rate comes down. So I think our focus on just getting everybody back to work is certainly key and appropriate. But certainly we can do more. We're very anxious to work with you and have been listening to your ideas, and very much something that there's an active process in the White House trying to figure out what we can do, because we obviously want to put everybody back to work just as fast as possible. So we look forward to working with you on that.
Thank you again. We miss you in Berkeley, but you're doing a great job here.
Congresswoman, could I answer your first question too? I agree with you, and I agree with Dr. Romer that it's not enough just to focus on things that we affect the national growth numbers, national employment numbers. I think there's a very good case for making sure we're providing targeted investments in communities across the country hardest hit by the recession, by the housing crisis, by high unemployment rates, and we are going to continue to do that. I'll give you just two examples of things we've done at the Treasury in this context with support of the President. One is to substantially expand the resources we put into the CDFI and new market tax credit programs, and those programs by design really only go principally to many of the communities with highest rates of unemployment, most adversely affected by the financial crisis. And We think they really work and have a very good record of success. And we announced just a few months ago a targeted program under TARP to give capital to CDFIs as well. And the combination of those two things are a very, very large, substantial increase in resources to low-income communities across the countries. That's just part of a response. I just wanted to highlight those two things. On the numbers, I'd be happy to take a look at those, see if we can explain what the disparity is, and I'll work with my colleagues in the administration to see if we can give you a response on the numbers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank all three of you for your patience. It's been a long morning, I know, and into the early afternoon.